Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Chased in the Woods by Monkey. I was about 16 at the time this happened, still living at home deep in the mountains at my family's home cottage. I frequently walked the woods surrounding my home, but never really went that far out, either out of lack of curiosity or simply because I was lazy. One evening, I decided to take a flashlight and walk as far as I comfortably could into the valley behind my property. There's a large amount of deer, bears, and other animals near where I live, so I also brought some bear spray with me. I was about 25 minutes, maybe more, into my walk, when I started to get an uneasy feeling like I was incredibly vulnerable, or that I wasn't alone. I shrugged it off because I probably wasn't alone. I mean, there was a lot of wildlife in the forest, so it wasn't like I was expecting to be alone. I neared a creek that flowed around our property and noticed some garbage and some pots and pans next to the water, as well as what looked like a tattered sleeping bag and some shoes. I didn't think much of it, and continued my walk, thinking about it every now and then, wondering if someone was camping out near our house. But then it was almost completely dark out, so I turned around and began walking home. I kept glancing over my shoulder back towards the creek, worried someone might be behind me. After about 5 or 6 minutes of walking in the pitch black, I heard some branches snap a little way behind me. My blood ran cold, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I turned around and spent a minute just shining my flashlight in every direction, wondering if a deer or, God forbid, a bear was following me. Once I felt sure that nothing was there, I kept on walking. Not even a minute after I heard running footsteps trampling behind me. I didn't even turn to look what it was or who it was. I just began running as fast as I could. I'm pretty sure I called out pleading with whatever it was or whoever it was to stop. I was still about 15 minutes from home. I desperately sprinted through the trees, trying to keep my flashlight pointed forward so I didn't trip or fall. I just kept pleading and screaming, hoping that whatever it was would give up. But I kept hearing footsteps stomping behind me, and branches being snapped off the trees violently. I also heard pained grunting and what sounded like someone violently growling. I began crying out of fear, tears filling my eyes as I ran, and it sounded like they were right behind me, almost like they could reach out and grab me. I heard one loud growl/scream right behind me as whatever it was seemed to have fallen or slipped up. I kept on sprinting and never dared to look back. I eventually stopped hearing the other running footsteps behind me once I made it to my property line, the light of my house in the distance ahead of me. That's when I turned to see if I was still being followed. What I saw still torments me even now. A freakishly tall man was standing about 100 yards from me with my flashlight, only barely illuminating him. He was wearing what looked like a tattered hoodie and no pants. I stood there for a moment, struck with fear, waiting to see if he would move. As I was about to turn away and run the last stretch to my house, he started sprinting viciously towards me, and by vicious I mean he was almost on all fours, using the trees to propel himself further, and grabbing at the ground, lunging towards me. I let out a scream and ducked under my fence and sprinted as fast as I could to my house. By the time I got there, I was completely out of breath, and my throat hurt and my knees were sore. I shined the light back towards the woods and saw the man at my fence waving at me, his tall and slender figure towering above the fence. I quickly made my way inside and locked all the doors. I woke my dad up and told him what had happened, and I don't remember exactly what he did about it, if he called the cops or just let it be, but I don't think anyone else ever saw that guy again. I still never go out into the woods alone or any time near dark, and I certainly stay away from the creek. I don't know if that guy is still out there, but I do know that if he had caught up to me, I might not be telling this story today. My Paranormal Experience by Faye. This happened to me when I was around 13 or 14, so about 14 years ago. I'll set the vibe. We'd moved into this house when I was 6, and I never liked it. Could never settle in it. I would actually, for months when we first moved in, put myself to sleep by repeating, "There's no such thing as monsters." Anyway, 2 years later my little brother was born, and when he was 3 or 4, he moved into my old room and I got a bigger room. He would always wake up screaming, saying there was a man in the corner of his room, trying to light it on fire. We could only get him to settle back to sleep if we put on Fireman Sam, the kids' show. Even when he slept in my mam's room, he'd have these episodes waking up saying that someone was in the corner, and there were bugs crawling all over the ground. So creepy, but we thought maybe a bit of night terrors or imagination were the answer. Fast forward another 5 or 6 years, and I was having breakfast, and my mam told me she had such a strange experience the night before. She was so scared that she was going to come and sleep in with me. She said she was asleep, but woke to the sound of someone breathing in her ear. In her sleepy haze, she thought for a few seconds that it was my brother, but then remembered he was at his dad's. She jumped up and turned the light on, and there was nobody there. So I went to school and came home to her burning sage in her room, and only her room. I was like, you couldn't sage the whole house? But she only had a little left and was going to get more the next day. Grand. But I didn't think too much of it. I didn't really believe her story either. Until the next morning, when I was off sick from school. I had tonsillitis, and Mam had gone to work. I was happily sitting in my bed playing Sims, and then I felt it. Almost a bubble feeling around my head, kind of like when you're underwater. And then I heard this really breathy breathing in my right ear. The one that if someone was standing beside me, that'd be the ear they'd be breathing in. Now, it wasn't a scary breathing, it was just these big, deep breaths. And I didn't feel threatened. But still, safe to say, I shit myself and legged it downstairs. I called my ma and told her and stayed downstairs all day until she came home. The woman forgot the sage. Grand, I thought. I'll just get murdered. Thanks, Ma. I went to bed and nothing happened. But the next morning was the same setup. I was happily playing Sims and it happened again. I remember I just put my hands up and said, okay, I'm going downstairs. But this time I made sure to take my laptop with me to continue playing The Sims. Well, Ma came home that day with sage and did the whole house. It didn't happen again after that, but a few weeks later my nanny brought me a special heat-resistant mug for drinking green tea from. That was our thing. And my mam and me were standing in the kitchen, talking and making tea, and I said as I was pouring the water into my new cup to make the tea, "Hey, I think the ghosts are gone." When I say I hadn't even put more than a drop of water in, it was barely a splash, I swear. The whole glass just shattered into millions of pieces. My ma and I just looked at each other and laughed and said, well, I guess not then. Yeah, that's my story. Nothing else has happened after that. We moved a couple of years later, and then my lovely ma'am one day told me, oh, yeah, when I was younger, that house we lived in had been boarded up. And a group of us broke in and did a Ouija board session, and things started moving around the place, so we ran and never went in again. Nice, Ma. You opened a portal to the spirit world and had us all move in 15 years later. This story is 100% true, and I've never had any other experiences like it, and I don't think I want to. The Letters by Conscious Map. This all happened about 15 years ago, so forgive me if my memory is a little foggy. The time I got a letter was about the end of my junior year, around March or April. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was some typical secret crush thing. I've liked you since the first I saw you, but I've never had the guts to tell you, and all that jazz. At first, I was flattered, because I hadn't really gotten a lot of compliments growing up, let alone have someone like me. I reread it before bed at night and giggled with glee, wondering who this secret admirer could be. To my surprise, and at the time pleasure, the letters kept coming. First a few times a week, then once a day. Whoever it was would leave them in my locker, my desk, by my backpack. At the time, I was so in awe, nothing about it sounded strange at all. I never once thought, how could this person know where all my classes were? I was too blinded by the flattery. Then, one day, the note inside the letter told me that my secret crush was ready to meet me and reveal himself. He gave me a date and a location. I was so ready to have my classic rom-com love story. I spent all morning doing my makeup and my hair, all to meet some random guy I didn't even know behind some bleachers. Classes ended and I started walking towards the field. Mind you, I was basically alone because everyone had already gone home. And that's when I saw him. He was walking towards the bleachers, and he walked in this really creepy fashion, constantly checking behind him as if to see if anyone was there. He was wearing a gray hoodie, one that covered his whole face, so I never really got a good look at him. But I knew something was up. You know, when something is wrong and you just feel it in your gut? Well, that was that moment for me. Quickly, I turned around and rushed to the nearest bus stop. And the letters started changing after that. First, they were more opinionated. He'd comment on what I'd been wearing, if he liked the way I did my hair or not, etc., etc. Then, over time, they got more aggressive, telling me to stop ignoring him and such. And at one point, he even threatened to come to my house. The worst part is, I bet he knew where I lived. I knew nothing good would come of this, but every day I would open the letter he sent me. And in some twisted way, I was still sort of happy someone was paying attention to me. I was too dumb to realize the real danger of the situation. This went on until about the end of May, when he finally asked to meet me again. This time at a gas station off the highway. Now, this wasn't that weird, given we lived in a random town in New Jersey without even a mall. Kids were always meeting at weird places like that. As a dumb, naive kid, I figured he wanted to sort stuff out and reveal himself again. And hell, I didn't even question his motives until I was driving there. It seemed normal at first, and I exited off the highway into the woods. But the farther I got, the deeper the hole in my gut got. I must have driven half an hour through the woods telling myself, 5 more minutes and then I'll turn around, when I finally got there. As I approached and took in my surroundings, my heart skipped a beat. The windows of the place were shattered. There was dirt everywhere. This gas station was abandoned. Hell, it looked like no one had been there in years. And standing by the door, leaning up against a wall, was a man in a gray hoodie, holding something in his pocket, God knows what. Heaven knows why it took me so long, but I finally came to my senses and realized how fucked up this whole situation was. With a rush of adrenaline, I slammed down on the gas and drove as fast as I could. I must have been going 90 miles an hour on some random, woodsy, empty road, but I was doing anything to get away. Luckily, that summer me and my family moved away. And after a while, I basically stopped thinking about the whole thing, until this friend from my hometown sent me a text. It was an article, and I remember vividly the way my heart dropped when I read it. It was about a girl who'd been found dead behind a gas station abandoned in the woods. All I could think of was, that could have been me. I will never forget how lucky I am that I came to my senses that night. The Man in My Driveway by Buzzo14. This happened a few years ago, and I've never told anyone about it. I don't even know why I'm sharing it now, but it's been on my mind again, and I just need to get it out. At the time, I lived pretty far out in the country. Just me and my dog, no close neighbors, and it was usually really quiet. And I liked it that way. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night to the motion sensor light going off outside. At first, I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or something. But when I looked out the window, I saw a man standing at the end of my driveway. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing my house. I don't know why, but I froze. I just stood there staring at him, and he didn't move at all. The light went off after a while, and everything went back to dark and quiet. I didn't sleep much after that. The next night, it happened again. The light came on, and there he was. Same spot, same stillness, just standing there, staring at the house. By this point, I was starting to get really freaked out. I called the sheriff's department, and they sent someone to check it out, but by the time they got there, he was already gone. The deputy told me it was probably just some drunk guy or someone passing through, and I shouldn't worry unless he started coming closer. That didn't make me feel any better, but I tried to move on. This went on for about a week. Every night, like clockwork, I'd wake up and see this man standing there at the end of my driveway. It was always the same. He never moved, never said anything, just stood there staring at my house. It got to the point where I started closing the blinds at night, but I still felt like I could feel him out there. And then, just like that, it stopped. I never saw that guy again after that week. There was no explanation, no reason. Everything just ended. I've never told anyone this before, and it's probably not a big deal, but it is something that stuck with me. I just needed to get it out. Fake Psychologist by Can Revolutionary. For some context, I had a really shitty childhood. It was terrible, where I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened through those years was from a mixture of sparse memories, and things that my family has told me about myself, and police reports. One of those things I do remember, however, is this lady I called Auntie. No first name, no last name, nothing else contributing to her identity. She was just Auntie. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old, sitting in her living room as she typed everything I said down on her laptop. I had no problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought that she was someone I could trust. 7 years later, when I was 14, I admitted to her that I tried to kill myself numerous times. It was a mixture of multiple different factors. My mother's increasing toxicity, my lack of social interaction at the time, and more importantly, I had never moved on from the horrors of my childhood. Now, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially due to the fact that I begged her to tell me why I constantly wanted to die. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get the chance to see a different person, maybe get a different sort of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my auntie. Auntie, at the end of these sessions, would try to defend my mother or make me seem like I was blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time on why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic, maybe being able to explain why my mother was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way. And then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Auntie started to ask very specific questions, especially to the topics I just mentioned. I was in shock. But again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things must be from the fact that at that point, she'd known me for almost a decade. All the way into a year later, she started to bring up the parties I'd gone to in those sessions without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of it all, something that still affects me till this day, at the end of each session, Auntie had started to invite my mom into the room and tell her every single thing I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse that she'd begun to put me through, said straight to my mom's face as she sat next to me. My grades in school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. So, on my 17th birthday, I tried to kill myself. I ran into my mother's room looking for something that I could overdose with, or just something that could push me to the edge. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I had barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she even had one of those. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes, and if I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a shit ton of papers. The prize of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in, and I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor and wondering what the fuck these papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Auntie and I's sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I had with her. I remember feeling sick, feeling so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions, and I decided that night that I would kill myself after what I figured out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed because I really only had a year left to figure out what the hell was going on before I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention in my sessions, looking around Auntie's house whenever I had the chance to, looking for some indication that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about Auntie, and she kept deflecting and repeating the same fact, that she was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but then it was really life or death. My mother was in the shower, and I had already packed all the stuff I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out of the house. I didn't even look down at the damn thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place. But even as I walked off the bus and years of text had been read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they called extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages. Which is smart. I give credit where credit is due. But it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit on the side of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching up Auntie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave my body then, and sometimes now I swear I can still feel the same sick feeling I felt then. I almost gave up. Almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers, because I found Auntie. Her account name didn't have her real name. It was some weird fake one. But when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends, and I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of herself and my mother years ago. They had literally been friends before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what the hell was going on. Why my mother had transcripts. Why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said. Why she defended my mother. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beat black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I'd found out earlier that day. And all I asked my mother that night was, who is Auntie really? She wouldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him since we applied to the same university. He's one of my best friends now. What finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way, clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched up the username in the search bar, and when it came up with Auntie's Facebook account. This psycho had been following me for God knows how long on my Instagram, and suddenly everything that hadn't clicked before finally made sense. The sudden, precise questions. Why my mother suddenly decided to isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her fucking bio. Tell me why it said chemistry teacher with over 20 years. Fuck my life. I admit that I cried like a baby that night because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female models seemed to despise me. Still, to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything from my childhood, instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university. It sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wish I had figured that out sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist, and trust me, I did my research. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I was sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do. I decided to share my experience just in the slight chance that anyone has had a similar experience with therapy becoming fucked up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys, it gets better, with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again. Uncle Josh note here. Couple of things really hit home close to me, suicide being one, and I think most of my listeners know how passionate I am about suicide with all of the people I've mentioned over the years that I've lost to suicide, so I don't take any of that lightly. And second, the reason that I found this so compelling and scary, and the reason that I wanted to share it, is the message of hope at the end. Sometimes it's not about monsters or ghosts or stalkers or any of that stuff. It's about the people we trust the most betraying us. As someone who has lost the trust of others, I understand fully how damaging that is in any relationship, whether it's your parents, your lover, your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, dog, goat, whatever you're into. I'm being cheeky. But anybody who's out there struggling, there is help, there is hope, and I hope you find it. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to UncleJoshTrueScaryStories@gmail.com. I read them all. Thanks for you guys sticking with me here. I know I haven't been uploading as much as I have been in the past few months or year or so. As I mentioned, I am now working in a different capacity, and it is springtime. I've got a million things to do with my family and all that fun stuff around the house. Also, I have once again been struggling with my respiratory issues that most of you are familiar with, and I'm extremely frustrated with the healthcare system that we have in our country. I have terrific health insurance, but for some reason, they will not give me a prescription for medicine that 3 specialists and my primary doctor have asked for. Every time it gets denied and they move goalposts and ask me to do something else, that does not give me any relief. I know I'm spilling my guts here, which I normally don't do, but I might need your help with something. I'm going to keep you posted on that. I'm wondering if we flood and spam the hell out of their social media accounts of my insurance provider. Maybe they'll take notice and maybe change their mind about getting me the medicine that I so desperately need. I know it's a little underhanded and sneaky, but I thought, hey, you know what? There's a lot of the people who listen to my podcast that I know that can be complete pests, and maybe would be willing to help out. I'll keep you posted on that. If you're listening to this episode on YouTube and you like what you've heard, please give the video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. I'd like to know what you thought about the stories. If you haven't, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for every time I do upload, and maybe even tell a friend about the channel. I'd appreciate it. Follow me on social media, and if you'd like to take your support of what I'm doing a step further, you can find a link to my Patreon page in the description, as well as my storefront over at tpublic.com. Lots of cool Campfire Crew and Uncle Josh merchandise, all there for you if you so choose to purchase some. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.